Shalom everyone. We are continuing our limud of Megillas Esther, and we are up to Perek Ches. It is the second day of Pesach. Haman has been hung. Baruch Hashem, that's a great, great simcha. That's the downfall of Amalek. Haman is descended from Agag that Shaul had spared. And Mordechai and Esther are able to, who are descendants of Shaul, are able to rectify the chait of Shaul. But it's very, very important to know that Haman's death, although that's a great simcha, does not end the looming tragedy that the Jewish people face. There is a royal edict that on the 13th of Adar, the 127 Medinot can rise up against the Jewish people and kill them with impunity. That gezerah has not yet been annulled. So the sakana is still here. So Perek Ches Pasuk Aleph continues. Bayomahu, on the very day that Haman was killed, second day of Pesach, Nosan HaMelech Achashverosh LeEsther HaMalka Es Beis Haman Tzorer HaYehudim. Achashverosh transferred to Esther the house of Haman, meaning the wealth of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Now here the Meforshim point out a very interesting thing. Normally, in the chiyuv of destroying Amalek, not only do you destroy the person, but you also destroy the property. A Jew is not allowed to take possession of the property of Amalek. So how was it shayach for Esther to take possession of Beis Haman if Haman is Mizera Amalek? So the Meforshim explain there is a halachic principle that says Mored B'Malchus, when one rebels against the king, when one commits treason against the king, his property, not only is he chayav misa, he's chayav misa as a Mored B'Malchus, but his property goes to the king, or to the government, or to the king. It does not go to his yorshim. A Mored B'Malchus forfeits the property. Now, since Achashverosh essentially paskined that Haman was a Mored B'Malchus, both because he was trying to kill the queen, and because he was trying to seduce the queen, and he was trying to kill the ally of the king. So Achashverosh donned Haman as a Mored B'Malchus. L'maisa, I do have a kasha, because L'maisa, Haman did not intend to seduce the queen and did not intend to kill the queen. He did intend to kill Mordechai. Is that enough to make him a Mored B'Malchus? I'll leave that as a question. But once Achashverosh declares that Haman is a Mored B'Malchus, all of his property now belongs to Achashverosh. Now, the Gemara has a principle that we weren't allowed to conquer the territory of Moab, but since Sichain Melech HaMori conquered it, we could conquer it from Sichain. Similarly, if the property of Amaleki is transferred to another guy, a Jew is allowed to benefit from that property. The same way Ammon and Moab became purified through Sichain, Amalek became purified, or the property of Amalek became purified through Mored B'Malchus Nichseim L'Melech. And that is the heter of how Esther Hamalka was able to take possession of Beis Haman. Now, the second thing that happened was, Mordechai ba lifnei HaMelech. Mordechai was finally able to meet the king. Ki higida Esther mahula, because Esther told Achashverosh what Mordechai was. Now, if this was simply a cousin, she basically said, he is my cousin. If, as Chazal say, that Mordechai was married to Esther. So I raised the question, does the pasuk mean that that Esther told Achashverosh, meet my husband? And how did Achashverosh respond? I don't know. Did Achashverosh simply say to Esther, oh, go back to your husband, I release you? What exactly happened? So my question is, did Esther tell Achashverosh, this is my cousin? Or did Esther tell Achashverosh, this is my husband? And if it's the latter, what did Achashverosh do? And in fact, that's an interesting question, Bichlal. Did Esther continue to live with Achashverosh after the Purim story? In a way, that would be very, very tragic, but the psukim are not clear. So, step one is Esther takes possession of Beis Haman, which could mean his house or even his wealth. Step two, Mordechai gets to meet the king personally, because Esther revealed their connection. And besides the questions I already raised, I have another question. Why couldn't Mordechai meet Achashverosh by virtue of the fact that he saved his life? Why wasn't that enough? Step three, Vayosar hamelech es tabato asher hevir mehaman. The king removed the ring that he took off, that he gave, he took from Haman, which is a sign of royal authority. Vayitno leMordechai. So Mordechai essentially became prime minister. Mordechai now had royal authority. And step four is Vatosem Esther es Mordechai al Beis Haman. Esther put Mordechai in charge over the estate of Haman. A little ambiguous. She made him a business manager, like B'dafka Y, or she just gave it to Mordechai, who would give tzedakah and everything else. Right? So these are the four steps. Esther gets Beis Haman. Mordechai is introduced to the king. Mordechai gets the Tabat HaMelech, and Esther makes Mordechai in charge of Beis Haman, Haman's house, Haman's estate, etc. Okay, so far so good. But with all of this beautiful story, the sakana is still here. Kind of, you've won a battle, but there's still a milchama. Okay, it's important to know, a lot of people think that's the end of the story. It's not the end of the story. Pasuk Gimel. Vatosef Esther. Esther continued. V'tzaber lifnei hamelech. She spoke before the king. Vatipo lifnei raglav. She fell in front of his feet. Vatepch, and she cried. Vatischanein lo, and she begged. Lahavir et ra'at Haman ha'agagi. Yes, Haman is dead, but his evil decree is still here. She prayed to remove the evil of Haman the Agagi. V'yes machshavto, and his evil plan, his thought. Asher chashav al Yehudim. And once again, when you come to the king unannounced, even though your life is in danger, but Esther was confident that he would receive her, as indeed he did. Now she's not so afraid. Vayoshet HaMelech l'Esther Shavit Hazav. Once again, the king extends to Esther his golden scepter. Vatakam Esther. And Esther rises from the ground, right? She's like supplicating from a begging position. And now she stands before the king. And she once again presents her case. Vatomer, and she says, Im ala melech tov, if this is good in the eyes of the king. V'im matzasi chein lefanav, if I find favor in front of him. V'kasher adavar lefnei hamelech, and if this is kasher, if this is a proper thing. V'tova ani b'einav, and if I'm good in your eyes. Again, in his eyes, speaking in third person to the king. What is my request? Yikasev, let it be written, Lahashiv es hasvarim, to recall, repeal, bring back the documents that gave license to kill the Jews. Machshavas Haman ben Hamdasa Agagi, the evil thought of Haman, the son of Hamdasa from Agag, Asher Kosav, that he had written with royal authority, La'abed es Yehudim, to destroy all the Jews, Asher b'chol Medinos HaMelech. And again, the next pasuk is also read with the nigun of Eicha, and it even uses the word Eicha, or a similar word to Eicha, Ki Eichacha Uchal. How can I be able, V'ra'isi b'ra'ah, to see the evil, Asher yimtza es ami, that shall find my nation. Eichacha uchal v'ra'isi. How am I able to see? I've done the eradication of Moladati, my place of origin, meaning the people from whom I was born. I was born from the Jewish nation, so they are called Moledet. So Moledet does not mean necessarily place of birth. Moledet means family of birth. Withhold, call back the books, repeal the books. Now, again, I want to point out an interesting thing. This is only a few days after the Gezerah. The Gezerah was, Yud Gimel. They fasted Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, Tetzvav Nisan, Tesai, and Haman is hung. And then we don't really know how long it took for Beis Haman and the ring, but Esther is pleading. Now, it could very well be that there are still provinces that haven't even heard the news of the Gezerah yet. Although I had mentioned that the Persians had a very, very efficient postal service. So the Gezerah is being annulled, or at least there's a request to annul the Gezerah, before countries have even heard of the Gezerah, perhaps. So, King Achashverosh, paradoxically, is kind of stuck. He can't just do what Esther is asking because of some crazy rules in the Persian legal system. Pasuk Zayin explains, Vayomer HaMelech Achashverosh liEsther HaMalka. King Achashverosh says to Esther HaMalka, Ula Mordechai HaYehudi, and Mordechai, the Jew, that's his greatest title, even though Mordechai is the prime minister. Well, I've done all that I could do. Hine Beis Haman Asati liEsther. I gave the house or the estate of Haman to Esther, who then gave it to Mordechai. V'oso tolu aloetz, and indeed I hung Haman, or Haman was hung on a tree, really a tree meaning a pole, al asher shalach yado b'Yehudim, because he wanted to kill the Jews. Now, technically, Achashverosh is portraying himself in a more positive light. Achashverosh didn't care that the Jews would be destroyed, but once Esther is Jewish, he doesn't want Esther to be destroyed. So now Achashverosh is playing, I'm a great Ohev Yisrael, which of course he was not. But I'm not anti-Semitic. I care about the Jews. I killed Haman because he wanted to kill the Jews. And therefore, this is what I can offer you. Pasuk Ches. V'atem kisvu ala Yehudim ketov b'yeinechem b'shem hamelech v'chismu b'tabas hamelech. You are authorized to write for the benefit of the Jews a new royal edict, whatever you think is proper. You can issue this new royal edict in the name of the king. You can seal it with the signet ring of the king, which was given to Mordechai, right, in wax. You inscribe the seal. Ki kasav asher nichta b'shem hamelech. Anything that was written in the name of the king, v'nachtom b'tabat hamelech, and it was sealed with the ring of the king, ein lahashiv, cannot be retracted. So again, here's what the Meforshim explain what's going on here. It's a bit convoluted. And that is, because the king was considered to be perfect, almost like a god, it's not possible for the king to ever make a mistake. Every edict that the king issued was treated as infallible and could not be repealed even by the king himself. So if a letter went out sealed by the king, this is Haman's first letter, that says, on the 13th of Adar, every person in the reign has the rishus to kill a Jew, I can't simply say, I'm taking away that permission, because that would be retracting a royal edict. And anything that was issued by the king cannot be retracted. So that gezerah that the Goyim can rise up and kill Am Yisrael, that remains in effect. But what I could do is, we can issue a new law that does not repeal the old law, but it adds to it, and that is, the Jews will be given the right to fight back. So I can't take away the old decree, but I will give you reshus to fight back. And this is the second letter. Now, people ask the obvious question, do you need reshus to fight back? I mean, let's imagine there wouldn't be this second letter. And the first letter says, on the 13th of Adar, the Goyim can attack and eradicate Klal Yisrael. Well, presumably, Yidden are going to fight back. I mean, what's going to happen if they don't fight back? The king is going to kill them? Well, I mean, they're going to... I mean, what's going to happen if they do fight back? The king's going to kill them? Well, they would die if they don't fight back. So, the significance of the king giving the permission of the Jews to fight is actually twofold. Number one, by legalizing the right of self-defense. Yeah, the Jews would have tried to defend themselves anyway, but by legalizing the right of self-defense, that would authorize the king's army to help the Jews, meaning to say, when the Goyim are attacking Yidden, it's not just the Yidden defending themselves, but the Chayolei HaMelech can defend them as well and kill the enemies. So the legalization of the right of self-defense will give them the support of the police and the army. And number two, it will allow the Jews to aggressively seek out Amalekim and kill them, even if the Amalekim are not attacking them. So it's not just, the second Igeres is not just giving the Jews the right to defend themselves, it's giving the Jews the right to proactively go after their enemies. So the first Gezerah will not be repealed, but alibi the emes, you'd figure that many of the Goyim won't attack the Jews if they know that the Jews have this right to fight back. So, number one, it actually does minimize the danger by reducing the people that will attack the Yidden. Number two, by legalizing the right of self-defense, the king's men will assist them, which in turn will also reduce the attacks. And number three, it gives the Jews the right to proactively seek out their enemies. But the one thing Achashverosh says he can't do is he cannot repeal the right of those people to kill Jews. So if anybody happened to kill a Jew, they could not be prosecuted. Okay, so that's the meaning of the background. So, this was done. Mordechai is prime minister, right? Mordechai can issue these decrees. Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech Vayisahi. The scribes of the king were called and summoned, and this was B'chodesh HaShlishi, in the third month. So again, we know that Haman was killed on the second day of Pesach. Then we had all of these negotiations, and we're given the fact that they didn't issue a second letter until 3 months later, or actually 2 months later. Nisan is the first month, Iyar Sivan, the 23rd of Sivan. And remember that all dates in Megillas Esther are given in two ways. They are given in the Lashon of the Torah, which always counts the months from Nisan. So Nisan is called Chodesh Harishain. Sivan is called Chodesh Hashlishi. And in addition, for the first time, we also use the names of the months, because those are Babylonian names that we picked up in the exile. So the same way, if you're transitioning to the metric system, the road signs will say both miles and kilometers. So as you're transitioning to the new way of designating time, you use the old way, Chodesh Hashlishi, and the new way, which is Chodesh Sivan. And it was the 23rd of Sivan. Vayikosev kachar l'asher tziva Mordechai, and it was written down the way Mordechai commanded it, as a second royal edict that was sent to the Yehudim, to all the Jews. V'ela Chashtar Panim, to the, again, Persia has many different names for nobility. Chashtar Panim are again the various nobles who were governors. Pachot, these are different terms for the governing authorities of the 127 Medinas. Sarei HaMedinas. So you'd have to know Persian history. Achashtar Panim, Pachot, Sarei HaMedinot, Asher Mehaidu V'Yad Kush, from India to Ethiopia, Sheva V'Yesra Meya Medina, Medina Kichsava. Every country in its alphabet and its language, V'yam L'Lashono, and even every subgroup according to its language. V'yela Yehudim, and to the Jews as well, Kichsavam, in their writing, meaning the Aleph base, V'Chelishainam, and in Hebrew. And what was written? These are called the Igros Hashnios, the second letters. V'yichdav b'shem HaMelech Achashverosh, and it was written in the name of King Achashverosh. V'yachtaim b'tabas HaMelech, and it was sealed with the ring of the king, meaning the ring was impressed in wax. V'yishlach svarim, and these documents were sent with, again, the Persian postal system. Basusim, biyad haratzim, in the hands of the fast riders, basusim, on horses, Pony Express. Reichvei harechesh ha'achashtranim b'nei haramachim. Now the Gemara itself says we don't even know how to translate these terms, but the simple meaning is that there were different types of riders who communicated the message. There were rochvei susim, there were people who rode on horses. Rochvei harechesh, they rode the rechesh. The rechesh, some say, means mules. That a mule is a crossbreed between a horse and a donkey, and apparently the rechesh could go very fast. And then we have hachashtranim b'nei haramachim, and this is, we don't really know what it is. Rashi says achashtranim, not to be confused with achashdarpanim. Achashdarpanim are nobility. Achashtranim is an animal, and Rashi says it refers to camels that were very swift. Now, we don't associate camel as a very fast animal, but apparently there were camels that were racing camels. And Bnei HaRamachim, that were the sons. So again, you might have thought these are people, but they seem to be animals. These swift camels, the sons of Ramachim. So Ramachim, again, was a breed of camel from which these camels were bred. Some say, the Ibn Ezra says, Ramachim were horses. So Achashtranim means camels that were also bred from one parent being a horse. Now, scientifically, there's a lot of problems here because you can't really mate a horse and a camel to get a camel. You can mate a horse and a donkey. You can't mate a horse and a camel. Now, some say Ashrim B'nei Rachim are referring to riders who were very quick. So we don't know. But what is being communicated is that the news went out very quickly, And what did the letter say? So remember, it could not repeal the old Gezerah. On the 13th of Adar, Goyim are given permission to kill Jews. If they kill Jews, they cannot be punished for it. And Achashverosh cannot repeal that rishus. But he's giving Jews a counter right. That Asher Nasan HaMelech LaYehudim Asher B'chol Ir V'ir, that the king is giving to the Jews in every city, Lihi Kahel, they have the right to gather together, V'la'amod al nafsham, and to protect their lives, Lahashmid v'la'arog, to destroy and to kill, Ule'abed, and to eradicate, Eskol Chel every assembly of a nation, a Medina or country, Atzarim that is afflicting them, and they could even do it to Taf v'Nashim, not just to the aggressors, but to the children and the women, because this is Amalek, Ushlalom Levais, and they are given permission to take the spoils, take the property for themselves. Just as the first letters gave the Goyim permission, the second letters are giving the Jews permission. And this will be B'yom echad b'chol medina Hamelech Achashverosh, for one day throughout the country, throughout the 127 provinces, B'shloisha asor lachodesh ne'masor, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is Chodesh Adar, Pas Shegen Aksav. The ultimate meaning of the document is Linasein Das B'chol Medina Medina, to proclaim as law in every country, Goli L'chol Ha'amim, to be revealed and known by all the nations. V'lios ha'Yehudim asidin liyom hazel yinakei me'eveim, that there will be this future date. This was sent out on the 23rd of Sivan, before that Adar. Lios asidin liyom hazel yinakei, to take revenge against their enemies. So again, what did the second letter do? Because even without the second letter, the Jews would have defended themselves if they could. So the answer is the second letter accomplished three things. Just to repeat, by legalizing and enshrining the Jewish right of self-defense, that will enable the police and the army of the king to protect the Jews against those enemies. So the enemies have the right to attack, but the Jews have the right to be defended. So that, number one, will protect Yidden, and number two, it will also discourage the attackers. So that's the first thing that it does. The second thing that it does is it gives the Jews the right to seek out not only those who are actively attacking them, but the enemies that would want to kill them, like Zerah Amalek, even though they're not aggressors. Right? That they couldn't have done under general self-defense. The third is they could even eradicate Taf and Nashim. And the fourth is Shalalam Levos, that the spoils can be taken as booty, as property. Now we'll see, the Jews didn't take advantage of that because it was Amalek property, but this is what the second Igaros did. What it didn't do is it didn't repeal the permission of the Goyim to kill the Jews. And once again, this was on the 23rd of Sivan, Haratzim Rachvei Arechesh, the runners who were riding the mules, Achatrashnim, they ride the Achatranim, the mules and the camels. Now why it doesn't mention the horses, I don't know, because before it mentions the horses, Yatzum Mevuhalim, they left in a confused state because they had to rush. Udachufim, they were dachuf, they were pushed. Bidvar Melech, Mordechai made them go faster than Haman made them go the first time. V'hadas nitna, and the law was proclaimed immediately in Shushan Habira. And now, once again, we are told that when this second law was proclaimed, Mordechai was again honored. The first time he was honored was before Haman was hung. Now he is honored. It's not clear. Is he honored by the king or by Klal Yisrael? It seems to be by the king. And because the king wants people to understand that in spite of the first letters, the second letters need to be taken seriously. And in order to negate the taina that people might have, that Mordechai made up the letters, Achashverosh Bedafka honors Mordechai after these letters are sent. And it says, during the Megillah, these psukim are read out loud, these two psukim. Mordechai Yotzim of Melech, Mordechai left the king Bilvush Malchut wearing royal garments, Techeles, the royal dark blue wool that was only worn by kings, V'chur, and white garments, V'ateres Zahav Gedolah, a big golden crown, Tachrich Butz, and linen garments. Now the wool and the linen were not sewn together, so technically I can wear wool and I can wear linen, and it's not shatnez as long as they're not mechuber. V'argaman, and scarlet wool. V'yoir Shushan, and the city of Shushan. Now the Pashtus is the Jewish people in Shushan. But the emes is it could even be the Goyim in Shushan, because they didn't see this as just that the Jews should be eradicated. Sahalah, it was joyous, v'samecha, and it was happy. And particularly for all of the Jews. And we say this in Havdalah. La Yehudim haisa ora v'simcha. To the Jews there was light, and there was simcha, and happiness, v'sasain, and joy, v'ikar, and honor. And Chazal actually say, Ora is a renewed commitment to the learning of Torah. Simcha is, they made it a Yom Tov. This is the beginning of making Purim a Yom Tov, although it's not Purim yet, but they're planning on making it a Yom Tov. Sasain is a commitment to bris milah, and Yikar is tefillin, which are called glory. Ubechal Medina Medina, Ubechal Ir V'ir, in every country and in every city. Makom Asher Devar Melech V'daso Magia, where the king's word reached. Right, this same lashon we had when Haman made his gezerah, and it talks about Avel and Sar, and now it's using the same lashon in Perek Gimel and inverting it. Instead of Avel and Sar, Simcha v'sasain la Yehudim, joy and happiness, Mishtei v'Yom Tov. Now this is before. Remember, this is not Purim. This is before Purim. But the gezerah that legalizes their right of self-defense became a great source of simcha. And not only that, but we are told, for Rabim me'amei ha'aretz misyahadim. Many of the common folk, the Goyim, misyahadim, this could mean they became Jewish, meaning there was a gerus, or they wanted to be Jewish, maybe they weren't accepted. Ki nafal pachad Yehudim aleim, because now they see that the queen is Jewish, the prime minister is Jewish. Achashverosh destroyed Haman, and he says himself, although it's not totally true, that he did it because Haman wanted to kill the Jews. They see the Yidden are beloved. They see the Yidden are chashuv. They have pachad of the Yidden. They want to become Jewish. Now it could be they weren't accepted as Gerim because their motives are not sincere. They just think it's a good deal. So the word misyahadim does not have to connote mamish, a gerus, but it means people wanted to become Jewish because they saw that the Jews were no longer a lowly, despised nation. Now, Einach, remember, Achashverosh never revoked the prohibition to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, so he still has something by which he's oppressing us. But the Goyim see that Klal Yisrael is very high, and they're scared of them, and therefore they want to become part of Klal Yisrael, although they lav dafka were accepted.